exploring the African narrative, leading the conversation and enlightening our listener towards a profitable Africa.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board the flight that takes you from stricken to straightened. We are seconds from takeoff. We ask that you please fasten your earpiece into your eardrum and please log on to africabusinessradio.com to avoid being distracted. Thank you for choosing Africa Business Radio. Enjoy this cerebral journey.
Ronnie is a promising young girl from a close-knit family in a society where there are strict adherences to family hierarchy, gender inequality, sanctity of marriage, and punishment by stigma. She always wanted to be a lawyer, but her father wanted her to become a medical doctor. He threatened to stop her schooling if she didn't comply. This crushed Ronnie as she was torn between her desire and her father's desire. She resented her father and family, got married early to get away from home, and from then on, suffered multiple ill decisions that proved to be detrimental to her life and progress, and she received support from no one. Ronnie was stricken.
Hello, everybody. Welcome again to Stricken, the show where we decipher how a combination of everyday factors could strike a person and affect their mental well-being. The show where we also seek to connect those that are stricken to practical solutions that will improve their symptoms and mental well-being. I am Ahmed Balaji, your host and presenter. I'm a London-trained mental health first aider. I will be taking you through this journey from stricken to straightened. Thank you to all those who tuned in on our maiden show and sent their feedback. We're deeply grateful for your support and candor. Continue to tune in and keep the feedback coming. If you are just tuning in, you can join the journey on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Africa Business Radio, and on Twitter at Africa Biz Radio. In the last show, the maiden voyage of Stricken, we briefly discussed domestic abuse and its connection to PTSD. For those of you just tuning in, PTSD means post-traumatic stress disorder. We also interviewed a survivor who, to help us understand the effects of domestic abuse from a victim's perspective. Today, I will be doing it differently due to popular demand. We shall together explore further the topic of the maiden voyage of stricken. After this short break, we will be looking deeper into the definition of domestic abuse, the key characteristics of an abusive relationship, compounding factors, how parents are affected by domestic abuse, how domestic abuse impacts the victim as parent, how abusive parents parent, how domestic abuse affects children, and what the relevant laws say. We will be right back.
Ronnie is a promising young girl from a close-knit family in a society where there are strict adherences to family hierarchy, gender inequality, sanctity of marriage, and punishment by stigma. She always wanted to be a lawyer, but her father wanted her to become a medical doctor. He threatened to stop her schooling if she didn't comply. This crushed Ronnie as she was torn between her desire and her father's desire. She resented her father and family, got married early to get away from home, and from then on, suffered multiple ill decisions that proved to be detrimental to her life and progress, and she received support from no one. Ronnie was stricken.
Welcome back from the short break. Earlier, before we went on break, I explained we will be taking a deeper dive into the concept of domestic abuse to further understand how it can be a factor for PTSD. In the previous show, we defined PTSD, but in today's show, we will do more than just define domestic abuse. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, take a pen and paper in case you need to jot down information for your records, and enjoy today's and mind opener. Allow me to take you through today's topic for the show, PTSD, Domestic Abuse, Episode 1, Part 2. Domestic abuse is any incident or pattern of incidents of controlling, coercive, or threatening behavior, violence or abuse between those aged 16 or over who are or have been intimate partners or even family members regardless of their gender or sexuality. Now, let's look at the two key elements there. We've got controlling behavior and then we've got coercive behavior. Now, controlling behavior is a range of acts designed to make a person subordinate and or dependent by isolating them from sources of support, exploiting their resources and capacities for personal gain, depriving them of the means needed for independence, resistance and escape, and regulating their everyday behavior. Coercive behavior is an pattern of acts of assault, threats, humiliation, and intimidation, or other abuse that is used to harm, punish, or frighten the victim. Now, there are key characteristics of an abusive relationship, which we would be going through. One thing we need to understand is that these characteristics will help us understand better how these things happen. It occurs in all ages, racial, socioeconomic, educational, occupational, and religious groups. Typically, it involves repetitive behaviors, including different types of abuse. It is used to intimidate, humiliate, or frighten victims as a systematic way of maintaining power and control over them. It is caused by the perpetrator and not by the victim. I must stress that. It's always caused by the perpetrator, not the victim. It's never the victim's fault. It is a criminal offense in most jurisdictions of the world, if not all. Differentially, it affects men and women. Women experience more violence over a lifetime, more severe forms of violence, and more serious injuries than men do. The most dangerous time is at the point of separation. Results in victim behavior that is focused on survival, e.g., minimizing or denying violence, taking responsibility for the abuse, that's blaming themselves, hiding the violence, protecting the perpetrator, remaining in the relationship. There is even a part of, you might see what we call elements of what is called Stockholm Syndrome. Stockholm Syndrome is where the victim is so battered down that they begin to kind of defend and protect their abuser. Now, if you look at the compounding factors of all of these things, you'd understand. You need to understand that race and culture. Under race and culture, you've got the fear of racism, lack of specialist agencies, maybe fear of betraying the partner in the community. You're wary of cultural stereotypes, particularly in a country like Nigeria, where everything appears to be a taboo. The other bit is nationality. There's perhaps a fear of deportation, language barrier, not aware of support due to language, threats of children being kidnapped. Then the other compounding factor will be class and status of the victim. They may feel daunted at approaching professionals because confidentiality concerns. Maybe if I tell this person, they might tell everyone. There's something they call Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Again, without the Milo, I bet you can understand the hierarchy of needs. What do you need first? Which one comes first and all of that? The person may feel embarrassed about how they will be perceived. So imagine, say for example, and I don't mean to demean women who suffer domestic violence, but I'm only using this example because generally men are not in the limelight of this. So imagine a man who's been violently abused by a woman. He may not come out to report it for fear that he will be embarrassed, that a woman violently abused you. What kind of a man are you, and all of that. So that's just a typical example of feeling embarrassed to come out to seek help. Now, the other be under the class and status would be, people look at, for example, for those who are rich and or who are wealthy, and they're suffering this kind of abuses. This part it is the part where they think to themselves, why am I complaining? I've got it all. I've got a car. I've got a house. It's just this little bit. You can't have it all. So, maybe I'll just carry on with it. These are some of the factors that compound, the incidence of domestic abuse. You also have disability. You've got age. You've got sexuality. Sexuality will be fear of being outed, which means, it can be as bad because women are not as violent as men, well, generally speaking. Fear of being laughed at. Again, it goes with some of the things I said earlier about a man being abused and not wanting to come out to say he's being abused or get help. The fear of being judged, escape from violence may cut them off from safe community. There's that thought also. So if I run away from these violent people, I won't have support. I don't know anywhere where I'm going. I don't know anybody where I'm going who could help me. So these are some of the compounding factors. But then again, all of these things happen. It doesn't happen by itself. These things happen, are perpetrated by people, and it happens within a community of people. So then we look at, within that community, you've got children, you've got adults. Adults are parents of children. So you begin to look at how do these things connect to each other. Now, what we understand is that how parents are affected by domestic violence. If you look at it, the tactics of power and control used by abusers may create a range of symptoms in the victim, such as low self-esteem, chronic fear, physical injuries, health problems, feeling crazy, depression, suicidal thoughts and behavior, drug or alcohol use and addiction, isolation, even reduced parenting capacity. So when you see a parent whom you feel is not properly parenting their child, I'm not saying that is automatically an indication of domestic abuse, but again, perhaps you might want to look into that to see how you can help them, better in that regard. Now, how does domestic abuse impact the victim as a parent? Now, both parents may not be perpetrating the abuse, but one of the parents will be doing it over the other. So the abuser may say the victim is an unfit mother or father, depending on who is the victim. The victim may fear that the children will be taken from them, either into care by the government or by the family of the perpetrator, otherwise, that the children may lose respect and value for the abused parent. So you're thinking, my children may not respect me because they're looking at me. I'm going through this kind of thing and it's my fault. Those kind of thoughts. Children may see the victim as an acceptable target for abuse, in which case it may encourage the children to begin to perpetrate abuse on that same parent who is the victim of abuse from the other parent. You see how some of these things connect. And the list goes on and on. We can also look at how abusive parents, how they parent their children. I know abusive parents parent. What it essentially means is that as a parent, your job, what you do as a parent, is parenting. So we want to look at how abusive parents do their parenting. They do it by controlling the whole family, having high expectations and fixed rules for the children, not being understanding. The abuser may have an angry style of verbal and physical punishment, which otherwise we refer to as straightening the child up and all that. Discipline may be a quick fix to an immediate problem, but not a thoughtful strategy based on reason and age appropriate expectations. Again, there is a swing between controlling and easygoing or neglectful parenting. Again, I could go on listing all of the different